this is how much we need from the international community, i.e. the IFIs, to finance private sector, and we had debt swap for climate action within the country platform. So you always hear that, and as we go to Brazil, country platforms are becoming very, very, more countries want to do them. We're helping Tanzania and other countries do their own country platform. It has to be country-led. It has to be according to your objectives. You have to be clear about the NDCs. You have to be clear about projects, and it's not only mitigation, but also adaptation is there, because that's also one of the areas of climate action. I can go on for a very long time, but two things to bear in mind. Climate finance exists. It's not too much, but it's up to the country to be clear with its projects. Quality finance means that we need sustainability, and i.e. technical assistance and capacity building in countries. And finally, country platforms do work. So I advise every country to have a country platform and a governance structure for it, so that you can attract whether it's FDI or concessional finance and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's very insightful. Thank you. And since we're on the topic of climate finance, there's been so much discussion around it, and yet when it comes to like the tangibility of what that's translated into on ground, it's been relatively limited. So, being not just public leaders but also elected officials, one of the things that I grapple with is the risk that comes with both committing to jobs as well as mobilizing finance. In the reality of what we see today, especially political leaders, they face that trade-off, is how much do we actually invest in energy transition, how much do we invest in climate change given those risks? How do you navigate that?
I'll talk from the public investment side. Any public money that goes into a project, this project has to be part of whether it's Vision 2030 or a national plan, which is ratified from Parliament. So that's a very important governance and political agency or buy-in, as you mentioned. The second point is, given that fiscal space is quite tight anyways, and we've been facing so many headwinds, not necessarily tailwinds, you want to put, for example, if I'm talking about renewable energy, wind and solar, do you have enough investments in the grid to upload this renewable energy? So the government has to be very clear with its priorities. I'll put investments in the grid, allowing private sector to generate the wind and solar, and this is what's going to create private sector jobs, skilling, greening, and also an entrepreneurial ecosystem sometimes, which does the measurement for the CO2 and so forth. So it's a matter of clarity with the objectives, a very constructive dialogue and understanding when it comes to those who ratify these plans, which is Parliament, which represents people and governorates and so forth. And then finally, what creates the continuous buy-in is that the projects get implemented, so people can see that the energy transition or the climate action is not just a burden on development, but it's part of development. Because each and every energy project, in addition to creating jobs, creates green capacity for more industrialization, for more economic activity. So it's very important to create the overall narrative, and there's so much work that has been written since Glasgow, actually, on the importance of thinking about climate action and development as inseparable. They are not mutually exclusive. It's not either or, and that is something that needs to be continued and pushed. I don't know the issue of yesterday and the announcement of yesterday, how consequential that would be on the multilateral development banks, on the dialogue around climate. Are we going to go back? So it's very strange that today is the first day of Davos, but yesterday this happened. So I think...
Minister Reddy, you were speaking earlier on about the challenges that you faced in the context of a newly formed state and trying to respond to the pandemic. Just talk to me then about how do we future-proof health systems against those kind of pandemics that you've spoken about from a governance perspective as well.
As I said earlier, governments will have to be focusing on two things. One is preventive care, and the other is curative care. And looking at this from the lens of how to improve this healthcare, one would have to be talking about availability, accessibility of healthcare, and also affordability of healthcare. All these three would have to be moving in line. In order to do that, from my state's perspective as to how we have been wanting to move forward is, we've taken every 2,000 people, every population with every village with 2,000 population as a unit, and we're coming up with village clinics.
Okay.
And then we're taking up every 30,000 population as a unit, and classifying it as mandal, and where we're coming up with 2 PHCs, primary health centers. These primary health centers would have 4 doctors, 2 of the doctors present in each of the PHC center, and they would be given an ambulance, 104, and each of this doctor would be given their designated villages. So 5 villages or 4 villages, depending on the mandal size, to each of these doctors. And these doctors, every alternate day, would hop onto the ambulance and visit the village, and they would become the family doctor for that village. Very soon the doctors, because they've been designated only those 4 villages, so they would start to identify people by names, and they would use this village clinic as a hub. This village clinic primarily would be having an A&M, nursing graduate, mid-level health practitioner, and ASHA workers that we spoke about also reporting there. So that would take care of the preventive part. Now comes the curative part. The curative part would be dealing with the community, with district hospitals, the teaching hospitals, and the area hospitals and the teaching hospitals are going to play a very critical role there. So there we are coming up with every parliament taken as a unit in order to ensure that there is equitable distribution of teaching hospitals. Because only when you establish teaching hospitals, you have postgraduate students actually coming up there. And only when you have postgraduate students doing their course there, and these teaching hospitals are connected to a hospital, a teaching hospital as well. So teaching college and teaching hospital together would become the tertiary care that we are looking for.